like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is all the way from the United States. Her name is Lorina Mirafuentes, and she's here to talk about misdiagnosis. It's going to be a pretty heavy topic. There's a lot to cover. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Lorina?
Thank you. I'm doing well. How are you, Christian?
I'm good. Always excited to do a podcast. Always excited to interview people. And I was stoked. Shout out to I want to make sure I nail this. Lorina Mirafuentes, who put us in touch. That's your executive public relations assistant.
Yes, and my name is Lorina Mirafuentes. If anyone wants to find me, I have a Facebook author page under Lorina Troy, but it's Lorina Mirafuentes now.
Fuentes.
Lorina Mirafuentes.
That's weird. In the emails, it was spelled completely differently. That's really strange.
Sorry about that. I'll have to check with her about it.
I see. This is okay. Side note: this is totally unrelated to things, right? So, I read the email, I saw the name, and my head went immediately to Lorina Mirafuentes.
Well,
Like I can't explain it, but it just immediately went to that. I read the email, and it says Lorina Mirafuentes, and I was like, okay,
I'll have to check with her on that.
It's really weird. It's one of those things where I think sometimes your brain corrects you, but then you dismiss it. And then,
no worries.
What is going on? Okay, Lorina Mirafuentes. I sincerely apologize for that. That's embarrassing.
No, it's okay. No worries.
Well, anyway, Ronnie put us in touch. And, I read your story and everything, and we'll get into that in a second. But I'm always stoked to have shows like this. I'm always stoked to do the show anyway, but it's always a challenge for me as an interviewer. And, it's even more of a challenge because you have to kind of deep dive into something. I'll read the statement that she sent over because I thought this was worth reading as well.
Okay.
So, Lorina and her family endured a heartbreaking experience after a child abuse allegation was made due to a medical misdiagnosis. What was initially believed to be abuse was later confirmed to be a birth-related condition and a benign external hydrocephalus. I think that's correct.
Hydrocephalus.
There we go. Thank you. During the years of legal battles, uncertainty, and emotional hardship, their faith became the foundation that carried them through. Through prayer, trust in God, and perseverance, the family found strength even in one of the most difficult seasons of their lives. Their journey is now being shared through the upcoming documentary, The Hidden Truth of Misdiagnosis, due for a 2026 release, with the hope of encouraging other families facing hardship and reminding people that faith can sustain us through unimaginable trials. I found some statistics, and I want to share them as well before we delve into things. So, according to NHS Resolution, so for our international viewers, NHS, National Health Service here in the UK, the body responsible for handling negligence claims against the NHS, that's what that is, diagnostic errors contribute to approximately 20% of all clinical negligence claims. A 2023 study by the British Medical Journal estimated that misdiagnoses affect around 1 in 18 patients in primary and secondary care. The same study found that misdiagnosed cancers, strokes, and heart attacks were among the most serious cases, often leading to life-altering consequences or even death in some cases. Yearly estimates of harm caused by misdiagnosis in hospitals in the US have risen over time, from about 40,000 to 80,000 deaths based on hospital autopsies to around 250,000 cases of harm of severity or any severity. And this is from a review of 22 independent studies. And then to roughly 376,000 cases involving severe harm. And again, this is in the British Medical Journal from 2005, 2006, I believe. I think it's 2005, volume 34, issue 6. So some pretty surprising figures there. I want to pick your brains about that for a second, because obviously, as you said off camera, it's been, you were followed around with this documentary for 2 years. This, well, actually, let's start there. When did this medical misdiagnosis occur? What year? How long ago are we talking?
In 2015.
Wow. Okay, so it's over a decade.
So much has happened ever since then.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Can I mention, since you're mentioning statistics, that's really interesting. I'm so glad you did that. And what happened to my family and so many families in the US is actually happening in the UK and many countries all across the world. One of the statistics in the US is that there's about 600,000 children in the foster care system. And the Children's Bureau did a report and found that around 91% of child abuse cases are found to be false and unsubstantiated. So out of those 600,000 children that are in foster care, there's around that many. In the United States, about 91% of child abuse cases are found to be false and unsubstantiated, which is very concerning.
Yeah. My first kind of initial thoughts from that are a combination of misreporting and I guess you could say maybe corruption. I mean, what else can you really say about something like that? Like that's a ridiculously high statistic.
Yeah, and our documentary, the way I made my documentary is, going through the situation in 2015, and it took about 2.5 years to get much better. And then over the past, 11 years or so, I've been a huge advocate for families, and I've shared my story with national, local news, and media all over the world in the United States. And I'm finding this is happening so often because so many families are coming to me and speaking about misdiagnosis and how their children have also been affected.
Obviously, we mentioned the title of the documentary earlier. Why did you decide to do a documentary? What was the kind of thought process there behind that?
Well, the national and local news and media have really been interested in my story for the past 8 years or so. I've been a huge advocate for families. I've met with over 15 senators and lawmakers all across the United States. And with all the information that I learned personally going through a misdiagnosis of child abuse with my son, I learned so much and I have so much wisdom and knowledge. And then after all these years of meeting with in organizations, attorneys, families, I've been able to gain so much knowledge, and I wanted to make a documentary that would raise awareness and help create change across our nation and worldwide. And the way that I made my documentary, because I'm also the executive director and executive producer of my documentary, and it is about our story, I really wanted to make it to help others. And the amount of information in there could definitely help others someday and help people feel like they're not alone, because when you go through this situation, you feel so alone. But then when you realize there's so many other children and families going through this, it's good because then you don't feel so alone and isolated going through this situation. And the information in there is so important because even if people don't have children, people have, nieces and nephews and grandchildren and friends that have children. So the amount of knowledge and wisdom can definitely help families. Our sound engineer actually went through a similar situation when we were done filming. So we're just like, wow, this happens so often to people all around us, and we just don't know because so many people, honestly, who wants to talk about, Child Protective Services is involved with my family and I? It's embarrassing. And people automatically assume like, what was wrong? They don't realize, children are being misdiagnosed so easily.
Yeah, the vibe I always kind of get in a lot of these instances is it always seems like, I don't know if it's just kind of like a societal thing in general, but it's always the kind of like guilty till proven innocent thing.
Yes, yeah.
Which I'm always kind of like, hold on, let's just get our facts straight before we start kind of... Before we start labeling things. Yeah. That's what I was going to say. But.
Yeah, it's like you're guilty till you prove yourself innocent type of thing.
And I mean, with something like this as well, I can only imagine what it must feel like in the moment. And let's go back to the beginning. So I wasn't really. There were questions I've asked over the years where I'm like, I don't know how else to ask the question other than to just ask the question. What was your initial response to a child abuse allegation?
I was just in shock because here my son was getting sick. We were taking him to the pediatrician, urgent care, children's hospital. And then what happened was my son was getting sick. He was vomiting. We took him to his pediatrician and then urgent care in the children's hospital, and they all kept misdiagnosing him with a stomach bug. So what other options do you really have when you keep taking your child to the doctors and they keep misdiagnosing him with a stomach bug? There's no other options that you have. And then his pediatrician said at his 4-month checkup, and she said she noticed his head was getting larger since birth. Take him to the children's hospital to have images taken of his head, and he should be fine. And then the children's hospital said that they found fluid in his head, and right away they just jumped immediately to, we think it was shaken baby syndrome. We think he was abused. And we're just shocked because then CPS showed up at the hospital. They interrogated us. No one wanted to listen to what we were saying to them, and even though we were telling them the truth, I was like, my son has never. I spoke with a pediatric neurosurgeon, and I said, my son has never been hurt in any way. Could this be something else, like as a medical condition? He said yes, but since he's a baby and can't talk, we're just going to go with abuse, and walked away.
Wow. Okay. So what happens next in that moment? So did they just take your child away, isolate you from the child?
Well, CPS coerced us to sign a safety plan. He said, if you do not sign a safety plan for 30 days, I will contact the DA and have your children taken from you right now. So wow. We were coerced to sign a 30-day safety plan. They made my children's father move out of the house, and then I had to have a family member be with me at all times with my children. And we were just like in shock because here we are taking my son. My children's father took my son to the children's hospital because I was feeling sick, and I stayed with my other son. And he called me, and then I went there and I spoke to everyone there, and no one wanted to listen to what we were saying, even though we were telling them the truth that my son was never hurt. But no one wanted to listen. No one believed us.
In the medical profession, we often hear about the term a second opinion, asking for a second opinion.
I did.
In that moment, did you just immediately hey, can I get a second opinion?
I asked for a second opinion. They said, no, we don't feel it's necessary. And then I asked if my son could see a neurologist, and they said, no, we don't feel it's necessary.
Is it a legal right to get a second opinion?
Well, now I shared my testimony at a legislative hearing in Texas, and it took 2.5 years to get a bill passed that would allow parents a second opinion in Texas, and that was passed, I think it was like 5 years ago. And it would be amazing if that could be a federal law someday, and even a worldwide law. And you would think that everyone has the right to a second opinion, but once there's wrongful accusations of child abuse or abusive head trauma, there is no second opinion.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, there's going to be a lot of this, I think, from me, this show, only because of the...
You're trapped in the system, pretty much.
Yeah, and also this isn't the first time this kind of an issue must have come up over the years. Do you know what I mean? Like, this specific scenario must have come up many times in many different forms. What do you mean you can't ask for a second opinion? Like, how can they have the right to bat that away? I'd argue in an instance like that as well, if you're trying, let's flip it around and let's say like it was a child abuse situation, right? Mm-hmm. You'd need a second doctor, an independent person to come in and give that opinion one way or another as well. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean? Like, the more opinions, the better in a situation like that. Just to kind of ascertain, okay, is the parent lying? Is the doctor wrong? You know, like you need that. And sometimes I forget, obviously, in the States, you've got federal and state law and these things are very different. But at the same time, you'd think that's just like a standard thing, you know? But I guess in many cases it's not. And it's not the first time on this show I've had people on, and they've surprised me with the types of laws they're fighting to get in, and they've only just got them in recent years. I mean,
Well,
it's
even
crazy
even though there's
sometimes.
laws, federal and state laws state that children are supposed to be placed with family. They denied my children that right. They would not place them with family, and they put them into foster care. And our federal law, our civil rights were violated. Our First, Fourth, and 14th Amendments, wrongful search and seizure by the government. And that's why we eventually filed a federal lawsuit against the hospital, the doctors, and CPS caseworkers.
Right, before we get there, I just want to delve into that for a second. What was the reasoning behind not allowing your child to be with your family? Because I would think in an instance like that, obviously they've gone through with this allegation. You've been sort of coerced into signing these forms, and you're just going through the motions right now because you have to, because you don't want to exacerbate the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But then for them to say, "Oh, can't your child's not allowed to go with their grandparents or an aunt and an uncle or whatever," like, were you given a reason for that? What was the reason?
No, our family actually went with us. So we had so much family that traveled with us to Texas at the court hearing and in the CPS office. And we said, why are my children in foster care? Why can't our family take care of them? They said no, and they gave no reason. And federally and state laws state that they're supposed to be placed with family, but my children were denied that right. And this happens very often, unfortunately.
Where is this hospital?
It's in Austin, Texas.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously this can't be the only hospital where these sorts of things are happening, but in your investigations, did you find maybe similar cases happening at this particular hospital?
It's happening. Yes, it is. Even if you look online, it's happening literally in every county in every state all across our nation and worldwide. People have contacted me in the UK, Australia, India, Norway, Italy, France. I was in a Zoom meeting, and there are people from countries all over the world. And it's happening so often, people just don't realize it.
Why do you think that is?
Honestly, there should be investigations as to why this is happening, but there's no specific answer. But going to lawmakers, like I have been, speaking to them about this important issue, and then lawmakers, they know it's a huge problem because lots of people have been contacting them. So having laws in place to protect children and families is so important. My attorney said that, people that are in jail and prison have a lot more laws to protect them than children and families do. Because, people in jail and prison, they're fighting for all these laws to get passed, and they're getting passed to protect them. But, the sad thing also as well is there aren't that many laws to protect children and families, unfortunately.
Let's move things along a little bit. I just want to kind of timeline things a little bit. So you said everything started back in 2015. The initial diagnosis was in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
In what year do we arrive at the point where you're able to get another doctor involved to get another diagnosis? So clearly, obviously, during that time, you said we had to take a federal lawsuit out. So you were fighting that.
That was 2 years ago. Sorry. I know we kind of like skipped around a little bit.
Okay.
So what happened was my son was misdiagnosed with child abuse. I had to have a supervisor at all times. The safety plan expired after 30 days. And my approved supervisor left her 4 kids in Oklahoma to stay with me and my children and I for about a month. And it was like almost 2 months. So I contacted my attorney and I was like, hey, the safety plan expired. My cousin left her 4 kids in Oklahoma. It's only a 6-hour drive. She really wants to see her children. She hasn't seen them for almost 2 months. Can we take a trip to Oklahoma just to see family and to see her children? He said, yes, the safety plan expired. Just go with your approved supervisor anyway, just out of precaution, but you don't have to stay here. So we traveled to Oklahoma so she could see her children and visit family. And CPS called me and said, where are you? And I said, we're just visiting family in Oklahoma. I'm still taking my son to see doctors. I could send you, the medical records. They said, no, that's not necessary. And that's when everything kind of flipped. And they seemed more aggressive with me when I told them I'm taking him to see other doctors. And so CPS Texas contacted CPS Oklahoma and said, take her children away from her right now. They're in immediate danger. And CPS Texas went to the judge in Austin, Texas. They lied and falsified court documents. They lied to the judge, and they said my children were in immediate danger when they were not. So CPS Oklahoma stepped in because we're their visiting family, and they did their own investigation for about 3 hours. They met with my children and I and our family and our approved supervisor. I signed over all the medical records to them, and I said, I'm taking them to see doctors. She said, CPS Oklahoma said, I deem your children safe. I will not take them from you, but I'm just going to let you know that CPS Texas wants them to be taken away. And then about 5 to 7 days later, I got a knock at the door, and the sheriffs showed up with their guns and badges in CPS, and they just ripped my baby out of my arms, and they took my 2 children, my 4-year-old and my baby. They just took them and gave them to CPS, and then CPS took them in the car and put them in foster care for 150 days.
I'm so sorry. I know it's probably difficult to kind of revisit this. I know you've probably obviously gone through this story a lot, but still, it's...
Yeah, it's...
I don't know. I've always had quite an active imagination. I can imagine it. It's and also, I think that the things I'm taking away as a just a person hearing this for the first time is, I suppose, the aggressive nature of the system. You know, it's not the first time I've ever heard government or institutions being like this. I mean, I could give you a million examples here in the UK, but it is also strange for them to kind of operate this swiftly and in this manner. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to understate the importance of child abuse situations, because that absolutely should be investigated and that shouldn't be overlooked. However, you have to have clear evidence. You just have to.
Yes.
And okay, let's continue. So your kids get taken into foster care.
Yes. And then my 4-year-old son, so they took my baby, he was only about 5-6 months old, and then my 4-year-old son also. My 4-year-old son lost 20 pounds within only 6 weeks of being taken, and the pediatrician said he showed signs of sadness and depression from being separated from us, his biological parents. And I lost them for 150 days. We had to hire attorneys and fight to get my children back in family court. And then a few months later, they actually wrongfully charged my children's father with 2 serious felonies of injury to a child. So not only were we fighting in family court for our children, he had to fight for his innocence in criminal court. And he had to turn himself in with his attorney. They put an ankle monitor on him for 2 months, and they treated him like he was this horrible criminal when he was in fact innocent. He had a top secret government and military security clearance, and we both had clean records, no prior CPS involvement, nothing. And they wrongfully charged him with zero evidence.
Is that his career? Is that why that's the case?
No, his career was he had a top secret government and the military and the government, and his career was totally like separate from the situation. But he had a clean record, and to have such a top secret clearance, they had zero evidence of any child abuse. That's what's so shocking. And they didn't even bring up, like, he has a top secret clearance with the government and the military. Why not do some more investigation to make sure there's clear evidence of child abuse? Because there was never any evidence of any child abuse, because that never occurred. They did find fluid in my son's head, because I'll explain it a little bit more later. Mm-hmm. And then, so he has to fight for his innocence. He had to hire a criminal defense attorney. We had to sell our house to pay for all these attorneys. I spoke with my cousin. She's an attorney for the city of Los Angeles. And she said, I know that you guys would never hurt your children. You hire your own attorneys and you fight this. So thank God she told us that, because we didn't know what to do in this situation. And then after about 5 months, 150 days, CPS said, we feel the need to return your children back to us because how badly my 4-year-old was affected. He lost a significant amount of weight. 20 pounds in only 6 weeks is, it's horrible to lose that much weight. And he was really sad and depressed. And then my baby, he missed doctor's appointments and an MRI checkup with his neurosurgeon. and checkups because CPS moved them 3 times within only 5 months in the foster care system. So thankfully, after fighting with our attorneys in family court for multiple hearings, I got my children back in 150 days. And then my children's father, he hired a criminal defense attorney, and he said, let me look through the medical records. You'd be shocked at what you can find in there. So he looked through all the medical records. It took several months. And then he said, hey, I need you to come into my office. I need to speak with both of you. So we took a trip to his office, and the criminal defense attorney looked at my children's father, and he said, I know for a fact that you're innocent. And we both looked at each other, and we were like, yes, this is what we've been saying the whole time. He said, I found in the birth records that your son had a birth injury. I'm going to hire a medical expert to confirm this. He's well known and highly respected all throughout the United States, Canada, and England, and, he's worldwide. So the medical expert confirmed that my son actually had a birth injury and a condition called benign external hydrocephalus. So finally, after 2.5 years, after a year, the CPS case was dismissed because CASA is a child advocate through the court system. He said, I went to the CPS office, I looked through both of your son's files for several hours, and I found 0 evidence of any child abuse. I'm going to request to have this case dismissed. And finally, after a year, the case with CPS was dismissed. And then for 2.5 years, that's when the criminal defense attorney was able to get my son correctly diagnosed. Because when I did have him, I was taking him to all types of different doctors. No one could find the correct diagnosis, because how can you get the best care if they don't even know the correct diagnosis? So after 2.5 years, we were finally able to have a medical expert correctly diagnose my son. And then that's when the criminal charges on my children's father were dismissed after 2.5 years. So in 2018, everything got much better. And ever since then, I've been sharing my story with the news and the media, national, local news, and trying to raise awareness and meeting with lawmakers to try to have laws passed to help protect children and families.
Thank you very much for sharing.
You're
It's a
welcome.
very harrowing kind of story to hear. Even from the way you're telling it, I could tell you've told this story many times. And like, what's interesting is, like,
Yes.
you remember exactly how many days it was. Like, just there's no forgetting it. It's like burned into your mind. Would that be correct to say?
Yes, and that you could do, like, honestly, this is an emotionally traumatic situation for the parents, the children, and so many people have PTSD, and they have to go through years of therapy to heal from this. And even though I've taken many steps to heal from it, I wrote my book, Miracles of Faith, to share a story, raise awareness. It's all about the healing process, to write about it, speak about it, but it's still a scar that's there that will never completely go away. And as honestly as I'm speaking about, the memory of CPS just the sheriffs ripping my children out of my arms, taking them, it's still a very painful memory to remember. But I do share my story to raise awareness and to hopefully help other families. And I just don't want any other children or families to ever have to go through this horrible situation.
Did you ever get an apology, you or your husband?
No.
Did you ever get... Right?
No.
Did you get compensation?
No, we are 2 years ago. Our attorneys filed a federal lawsuit against the Children's Hospital, the doctor, and CPS caseworkers. And it's been 2 years, and oftentimes they try to have the cases dismissed, even though there's sufficient evidence. But sadly, these judges are dismissing these cases, which is horrible and shouldn't be happening. So we just hope and pray that our lawsuit will go through.
Do you know why they get dismissed? I mean, on what grounds?
Honestly,
evidence?
if these cases get dismissed, then they can continue to violate families' civil rights. So it's a really unfortunate and sad situation, but we just hope and pray that it won't be dismissed. But that's what they are trying to do right now, and our attorneys are trying to fight that.
Kind of sounds a bit like institution protecting itself kind of deal. You know what I mean?
Could be.
I mean, I don't want to play conspiracy theorist, but it's just weird to sit there and think, you've got judges sitting there. Do you get juries at these court cases?
You could either choose to have a trial by jury or a trial by judge, I believe.
Okay. And which have you opted for? Are you allowed to talk about that?
Honestly, we haven't even got to that. It hasn't even reached that point yet. 2 years,
Wow.
yeah, the cases go very slow, very slow. In the federal court system, I believe in the states, like in the state system, they have more of like a timeline. But unfortunately, in the federal court system, it could go on for years. And we didn't know that. If we would have known, it probably would have been filed within the state, not the federal court system.
I just find it baffling that, it was proven that there was no child abuse, and it was proven that it was a misdiagnosis, and it was proven that your husband was completely innocent. And in the wake of all of that, no apology, no compensation, no, hey, you know what, we got it wrong, nothing. What the hell?
Yeah, you know what's amazing, Christian, is so I was looking through the medical records, and this was in 2018, so about 8 years ago. I was looking through his medical records. I'm like, I feel like there's something that we're missing. So I was able to figure out the hospital where my son was born, where he had the birth injury. They knew he had a birth injury. It's in really small print in the medical records, and they never told us anything. So the hospital where my son was born at, they knew he had a birth injury, and they never told us. But they put it in really small print, and they left a lot of details out. And then the children's hospital, I saw this report from the day it first happened, the first day where they're trying to say he was abused, right? I found a report that said MRI report protocol for hydrocephalus. So the children's hospital knew he had hydrocephalus. They never told us anything, and instead they made a false report to CPS of child abuse.
I'm calling it now. I think we're going to see you in the news at some point in the distant future, or maybe not so distant future, winning this court case, and it will be one of those moments that's like significant for the United States, because this is crazy. This is not normal. And look, we all know that every country has its flawed law systems. We've heard extensively how flawed the United States law system is flawed. Same in the UK. I'm not trying to attack either system. It's just we know they're flawed. There's many issues, particularly now. But every now and again, you do hear these stories, but particularly in the States, that crop up, and individuals like yourself campaigning for years and years, and then they finally get some justice. And I honestly see that happening.
Thank you.
Just quickly throwing it back to the documentary. Do we have a specific release date yet? Do we know when that's coming up?
Honestly, it finished a month ago, but I do have
Okay.
I do have connections working with very large platforms to get it onto these very large, well-known platforms, and I can't mention who they are right now. But meetings are taking place, and I'm just hoping and praying that this very large platform will say yes. And if they do say yes, it will go worldwide to millions of people can see it, and that's what I hope and pray for, because this awareness is so important, and it could help so many children and families someday. And hopefully it'll be aired soon. I will definitely let you know. But that's what's been so hard for me, because I can't just air it. Otherwise, the platforms they won't want it if it's already out there. So I just have to be patient, because they're definitely having meetings, which are going very well, I'm being told. And I'll definitely let you know. I can't wait for people to see it, because it's such a powerful story that will definitely, so I learned in the filmmaking process, what makes a powerful film is empathy. And our film definitely will draw empathy from the audience. And I just hope and pray that it will help motivate people to also fight for change. Because it's, I'm part of organizations, and there's organizations, attorneys, advocates, that are also fighting for change. But it's something that where so many people need to get involved, because it's such a, it's a huge issue that needs to be fixed.
A couple of years ago, I watched a documentary series called The Vow. It was made by people that had survived this cult situation, and the documentarian Mark Vicente, who filmed it, made it, was also part of that cult, and it documented their experiences over time when they were in the cult, and then also later on coming out of it, and then the convictions that happened thereafter, etc. Now, the reason I bring this up is that it was made as a series. It ended, I think it was in 2021, 2022, something like that. And then I remember thinking at the end, like, oh, this story is far from over. And I was right. 2 years later, there was a second season, a follow-up, and it gave us kind of more of a conclusion to the story, so to speak. And obviously, stories never end. You know, they keep going in some shape or form. But at least the main crux of it had ended. I've not seen your documentary yet. I've heard a snapshot of your story, but I understand that the story is not over. Now, given the fact that you're still paving your story, and you've now filmed and documented your story, do we see a follow-up in the future? Maybe when you've achieved that win in court and you've sort of come out the other side.
Yes, we would like to definitely have a follow-up. I was actually, the production company that I work with, we would love to have a docuseries, because we know so many other compelling stories as well. Like, this could go on forever, because, you know, this is happening to doctors, nurses, people in the military and the government, engineers, teachers, firefighters. It's happening to so many people. And it doesn't matter which career you have, how much money you have, or which nationality you are. It's happening to people everywhere. And, you know, that's the shocking part to me. I'm like, how did this happen to a doctor? And he was wrongfully accused from his own hospital. And then even in California, there's a doctor and his wife nurse. This happened to them as well. The child passed away. They were charged with like murder and manslaughter. And it was just shocking. And they took their kids. And also, that child had a medical condition, but they put their families through such a horrible nightmare without, you know, having the proper testing, having proof and evidence. You know, it's, yes, we are strongly firm on, yes, let's help children that are being abused. But then on the other end of it, there are children that are not being abused that have medical conditions. Like, why don't we have the right to a second opinion? Why can't we call in specialists? I asked if my son could see a neurologist, and they said no. I asked if he could have a second opinion, and they said no. So once this happens, once there's suspicious child abuse, like a suspicion of child abuse or allegations in a hospital, you are trapped. You are not going anywhere. You're not getting a second opinion.
I just want to take it back for a second and focus on you and your family, sort of during and the aftermath of everything you went through. So let's focus in on sort of the moment that your children are taken away. This is devastating for any parent to have to deal with. Walk me through how you're coping with this situation, how you and your husband and your family were coping given what was going on.
Well, honestly, my children's father and I are not together anymore. It's not because of what happened. It's just because of, you know, sometimes people are just so different, and it's really tough for them to, you know, see things eye to eye. And we're great co-parents. We take care of our children, and they're well taken care of. It's really tough, because just navigating the whole, you know, going through that situation, healing from it. I thank God for my faith and prayer, and the support from my family and friends, because that has helped so much. And then connecting with so many other people that are going through it helps as well. But honestly, this really challenged my faith, because it's like, you know, when you try to do everything right in life and you just question, like, how can this even happen to me? Like, I remember praying and I'm like, why did this even happen? Like, why can't we be spared from this horrible, emotionally traumatic situation? But then you realize that eventually, years later, we could turn our pain into purpose to help many other people someday. And that's the way I try to view it, is like, yes, it was such a horrible situation, and it hurt my children and my family so deeply. Is like, I can't even explain the hurt and pain for not having my children for 150 days. Every second of every day that I didn't have them was so excruciatingly painful and heartbreaking. I had to pray for God to give me the strength to get through it, because it was so heartbreaking not having my children for 150 days and not knowing if I would ever get them back, because only 35% of parents get their children back, even though they did nothing wrong. It's just...
sorry.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to add is that I often think about this in situations like this, particularly with many of the heartbreaking stories I've heard on the show over the last 6 years of doing this show. Where my head tends to go to is the day-to-day. Like, when you think about the worst moments in your life, it's like everything's paralyzed. You almost like it feels surreal, and in a weird kind of messed up way, the concept of like going to work just feels laughable, even though it's something you have to do. I mean, how do you do that? Like, how were you coping with stuff like that? Like, I understand, obviously, like you said, like your faith and support from friends, but it must feel pretty pointless to go to work and do stuff like that all the while, like your kids are, out there, and it's a powerless situation. And like, how were you contending with that? Like, how did you get through that?
Honestly, it was so heartbreaking, because it's, they were placed in foster care with strangers I didn't even know. I didn't even know if they were being well taken care of. What if they were being abused? And I only got to see them twice a day for only 2 hours at the CPS office. And there's this big glass window there, and they treat you like you're this horrible criminal, and you have to be supervised with them at all times. So just like not having them every day was so heartbreaking, because they're with us every day. They're never away from us. And I remember just praying, and I'm like, God, I feel so heartbroken right now. I felt like I didn't have the energy to just go make myself food. So I would pray, and I'm like, please just give me the energy to go make myself some food and to stay strong to fight for my children. Because the heartache and emotional pain that you feel not having your children every day, every moment of every day, was so excruciatingly painful. I can't even explain it. And honestly, there are parents that have committed suicide because the pain is so deep. There's another documentary that was briefly featured in called Take Care of Maya. It's on Netflix. And sadly, the mother, in that situation actually did that, because it's the pain. Like, I got emotional when I watched that, because I'm like, I understand the pain that she felt. And all the parents that have lost their children, it's so painful. And that's the thing, is like, why are there no laws to protect children and families from this deep emotional pain that hurts so bad to your core? And the children as well. My son would cry every night. And he was so sad without having me in his presence, because I was always there. And it's just, that's what hurts me so much, is when mothers call me and contacting me, and they're crying, and they're saying they took my baby too. It's hard for me to not get emotional as well, because I know and can connect with that deep pain that they're feeling. And that's why we've been trying to raise awareness and share our story. And that's why we made our documentary, because I hope and pray that this awareness can reach millions of people someday worldwide, and help light a spark across our nation and worldwide for some much needed changes.
Let's talk about that. What have been the kind of most memorable interactions you've had over the subsequent years, talking about your story, sharing your story, and meeting people and helping people with misdiagnosis situations?
Honestly, with meeting with lawmakers, it's been awesome, because I've been able to connect with some that actually are, there's a chair and state representative that told me, he said, I'm so glad that your story and other family stories was in the news and the media, because it helped shine a light on how broken the system is, and we want to work with you to try to fix it. And then 2.5 years later, that law was passed, and it takes a very long time to, put a law together and have it passed and have it go through the state and the Senate. And thankfully, after 2.5 years, it happened. And then also, I remember a mother, she contacted me, and she was crying, and she was like, they took my baby, please help me. I don't know what to do. I'm so heartbroken. And I asked her which state she was in, and I remember there's an amazing attorney in Texas that he's somehow able to help get children returned back faster to their parents. So I recommended that attorney, and you also need a medical expert too to help try to correctly diagnose them. So then she hired this attorney, and a few months later, she got her baby girl back, and I was like so happy and emotional. I'm like, thank God.
To anyone who's listening right now, who might be questioning a diagnosis, they're in a similar situation to yourself, could even be the same situation, or for people who are actively dealing with the fallout of a misdiagnosis, what advice could you give to them?
To just know that you're not alone, stay strong, and never give up. And, it seems so easy to have that type of suggestion, but it's going through it myself is like you feel so alone that no one else is going through this. So you feel so alone and isolated. But then a few years later, I was able to connect with other people like, wow, so many other people are going through this too. And to stay strong and to never give up. I had to pray so much and just ask God to give me the strength to get through this, to fight, to get my children back. Because honestly, you're so heartbroken and devastated not having your children. And then you have to go to court for many hearings. And, 1 month you get a hearing and then you don't get another hearing for 2, 3, 4 months. And so you just hold on to this hope, like, when could I get my children back? And you're fighting with your attorneys. And oftentimes you're sitting in that courtroom, you can't say anything. Your attorney sometimes barely speaks. And they're like, okay, well, let's reconvene and meet again in a few months. And it's like, and then they have you go through all these classes. You have to have a psychological evaluation. You have to go to mandatory therapy. You have to take protected parenting class. And people have to work too and then see their kids. And it's like, how do you emotionally function and do all of these things and jump through all these hoops when you are so heartbroken and devastated not having your children?
What has the concept of misdiagnosis taught you about life?
The concept of misdiagnosis has shown me about life. Can you go a little further into that question? I don't, so I can elaborate.
Yeah, I wasn't really sure how to word it either. I was kind of, so I often ask people, I always have questions at the end of the show, and they're kind of like, reflective questions. It could be about what we've spoken about. It could just be in general. I suppose just what has misdiagnosis taught you about life?
Oh, okay. Wow, that's a good question. Honestly, it has really opened my eyes to how everything really is, because, we're often being told like, oh, you have all these laws and rights to protect you. CPS is doing everything to protect children. And when you go through this situation, when you're in a hospital and you're going to court and you have attorneys and there's judges and all these things that are happening, it opens your eyes to how the system really is. Like the truth of how it really is, as opposed to what we're being told. And granted, there's good and bad in everything. Doctors take an oath of do no harm. And sometimes they can lie and say children are being abused when they're not. Or sometimes this lady, she went through a similar situation she works in the medical system. And she said, Lorina, honestly, us in the medical system, some of us don't really know this is happening. And doctors are being trained to see, okay, so say they see an MRI and they see fluid in a child's head. And they see hemorrhaging, like there's a subdural collection of blood, a little bit of blood, and then there's CSF fluid. They immediately assume it's abuse because they're being taught it's abuse. These doctors aren't being taught like, hey, if you see fluid on an MRI or a CAT scan, there are other possibilities and other medical conditions that this can also be, and it's not necessarily child abuse. So that's also the problem as well, is, if doctors are being trained in school and being told, if you see this is abuse. And, that's the thing too, is like, it's so important to have a medical expert that is trained and qualified, like a neurologist. A neurologist would be able to say, okay, this is what this really is. And there was never, and I asked if my son could see a neurologist. They said no. And I was very concerned about that. And I'm like, why not? That's a specialist. It's important for him to see a specialist. And they said no. So it's very important. Like there are these child abuse pediatricians in hospitals, and I don't understand how they're giving so much authority to child abuse pediatricians, because they are not a specialist in all types of different medical conditions. Because there's there's cardiology, there's geneticists, there's neurologists, there's doctors that specialize in broken bones. There's so many other conditions that can be misdiagnosed with child abuse, and it's very concerning that child abuse pediatricians are given so much, authority to say, "Oh, this is what this is." But the medical expert in our situation said she was not properly trained or qualified to read his images correctly. Otherwise, she would have been able to correctly diagnose him herself, and she did not. So that's the other concern: is why are these children not being able to get a second opinion? Why are they not letting medical experts that are properly trained and qualified in the type of situation that it's in? Because it's like, there's also children that have broken bones, but then they don't realize that this could be a genetic condition where their bones could be fragile and break easily, or it could be something like osteogenia imperfecta. I believe I've heard of that as well. So it's just very concerning that they're giving so much power and authority to one doctor, when this could medical experts that are specifically trained and qualified in that particular field should be looking at the child, giving the child an proper exam, looking through all the medical records from birth, prenatal records all the way until however the child is. It's so important. But, unfortunately, those precautions are not being taken when they should. And you're unfortunately guilty until you prove yourself innocent, type of thing.
Has this ruined your trust in medical professionals, the state, the police? Like, how do you feel about them now?
Honestly, it has definitely affected my trust in all aspects of the situation, because, there's so many that are involved in this situation. And it definitely affected my trust in them, for sure. And I really strongly believe in, a second opinion. Like my stepdad, he has melanoma, and my mom said that, there's a spot that's resurfacing. They took a sample and they said it's not cancerous, but it's, it's red and it looks concerning. So I even told her, I'm like, hey, it's great to get a second opinion just in case. Like, I got a second opinion with my son eventually through our attorney, through a medical expert. And thank God that we did, because he was able to be correctly diagnosed.
I'm really happy that it worked out for you, at least where that's concerned. I know we're not at the end of the journey just yet, but I'm glad to just hear that, you got your kids back and you were able to prove it all and keep fighting it and turn your experience into something positive, which is easier said than done. But it's inspiring stuff, and
thank you.
That's I'm glad to be able to share that story here on the podcast. So thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you and for having me on your podcast. And also the thing too, as well, is with my son. So what happened is they said he needs to have surgery to drain the fluid from his head. So they drained the fluid through an external VP shunt. And then a few weeks later, the fluid reaccumulated, and they said he has a chronic condition. So I asked them, I was like, why does he have this chronic condition? And they said, we don't know. And I'm like, this is so weird. They're trying to say he's been abused. Now it's a chronic condition. This makes no sense to me. And he can't see a neurologist, or I can't get a second opinion. So then they had to have a second surgery for an internal VP shunt to be placed, because he had a chronic condition. So then he had to have a second surgery, and that was so heartbreaking to see my baby have to go through two very serious brain surgeries. And thankfully, the surgery was a success when he was a baby, and he still has the VP shunt to help drain the fluid from his head, because he has a chronic condition from the hydrocephalus and the birth injury.
Do you think those doctors were just, I don't know, like just terrible people, or they just were looking, they just didn't like the look of you, so they decided to make your life hell? I mean, do you know what I'm trying to ask? I don't know if I'm really asking the question very well, but it just seems very callous, very cold. very dismissive, erratic, I would say as well.
And that's what didn't make any sense to me. We're at the hospital, and we're telling the doctors and the nurses and CPS. I was telling them my son has never been abused, and they kept asking me, "Who shook your son?" I was like, "No one shook my son," because they were trying to say shaken baby syndrome. I was like, "No one shook my son. He was never hurt," and they did not want to believe what we said. And they're acting very cold and very mean to us, and they're treating us like we're these horrible child abusers when we weren't, and we were telling them the truth. And they didn't want to listen to anything that we had to say.
Yeah, and that's the thing as well. Like, I understand if you have suspicions and you're a medical professional or you're working in law. I understand that completely. When allegations like that are made, it's very serious. Like, the closest thing I could really compare it to, as far as like at least how it should go, is, let's say you're a teacher in a school and you're accused of something, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how it works in the States, but here in the UK, you're immediately suspended, but you're not fired.
Mm-hmm.
You're suspended. It's investigated. And then, if you're guilty, obviously you're fired and the law takes over from there, if need be. Or if, it's proven you're innocent, you're reinstated, goes on like normal. Yeah, the public opinion is going to be tricky. That's just people, isn't it? You can't really avoid that. But when it comes to how the system should work, that's how it should work out. Like, for instance, just kind of going over a few things before we move on. They had no proof. They had suspicions.
Mm-hmm.
I was glad to hear you were at least able to see your kids in some capacity. I know it was, a horrific kind of situation, but at least you were able to like physically see them and be like, okay, I at least know that they're alive and that, they are, not okay, but like I can see them,
Mm-hmm.
But I would argue they should have had like a supervisor situation, like a state appointed official that's there present when you see your kids, so you can physically be with them, but that person has to be there. And yeah, it sucks that they have to be there, but then you still get to see your kids. And then throughout that entire process, that person can then take notes. They can be, it's useful for the law end as well. Like for the case against you, they can go, well, I've been with this family for, say, a month and I've not seen any issues. This is the relationship I've seen. And then that is useful as part of the witness stuff in court and stuff. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, that.
Yeah, there's a child advocate through this court system called CASA. Mm-hmm. And they did a great job helping us because, they met with us, they met with my children, spent time with us, and like, wow, this doesn't seem right. Something seems off. And they went into the CPS office and looked through my children's files. And they told me, I found zero evidence of any child abuse. I'm going to have this case dismissed. Because I told them, how much more do we have to suffer through this? I lost my kids. Yes, I got them back. But then we had to sell our house. There's mounting attorney fees that we're still paying off. Like, how much more do we have to suffer for this? And then he said, I'm not request for this case to be dismissed. Like, he realized we went through enough. It was horrible. And we never got an apology from anyone. Not CPS, not the criminal court system. They never said, oh, whoops, sorry, we charged you with, my children's father. Sorry, we charged you with 2 serious felonies for 2.5 years and pretty much ruined your career and your life. But, there's never any apologies at all.
What do you see coming out of all of this in the future? Like, where's your head at as far as where you think this is going?
Honestly, I really hope that our documentary will bring forth a huge awareness across our nation and worldwide, and I hope millions of people will see it someday. And I hope that it will help bring forth laws and bills to help protect children and families. And it's just, it's so important for so many people to see it, judges, people in the court system, attorneys, people that are police officers, sheriffs, they need to know that this is happening. And like, how do we protect children and families? How can we make changes to the system so that this doesn't continue to happen? Because oftentimes, honestly, have you ever heard like, oh, just take the children, we need to rule on caution. Like, what if they're being abused? But that's another important thing that's shared in my documentary is the emotional and mental aspect of this as well. Like, how does this huge emotional trauma affect children and families? And there's some information in my documentary that is so important because it answers the question of the title, like the hidden truth of misdiagnosis. My documentary definitely touches base on that, and it goes in depth, and I made it so it can help children and families, because so many children and families are left with, we were so emotionally traumatized, how do we heal from this? It's a common question that people have asked me, and that's why I made my documentary as well, is to help show families like how can you heal from this?
Thank you very, very, very much for sharing your story. I've got final couple of questions for you, completely unrelated to today's show, just questions I ask every single guest.
Okay.
Here we go. What's the worst advice you've ever received?
The worst advice I've ever received. Let me think about that. That's a really good question. The worst advice I've ever received. Okay, so there was this therapist, and she said, why are you saying your son hasn't been abused? Why don't you just admit it or acknowledge it? And I was like shocked. I'm like, excuse me? She was like, CPS said your son was abused. Why don't you just admit it or acknowledge it? I was like, because that never happened. I'm not going to say something that's not true or lie because that never happened. So that advice of her trying to tell me to admit to something that never happened was the worst advice, I believe.
Did you get up in that moment and be like, you know what, I'm just going to leave? Or...
I wanted to, but you're forced to see a therapist through the court system. She did discharge me because she said she doesn't need therapy. We're going to discharge her. And then in the courtroom, they tried to make me look bad because I got discharged from therapy, which was crazy. I'm like, I don't need therapy, but they force you to see a therapist. So my attorney said, can she just see another therapist? And then the judge said yes. So, and then thankfully the other one that I was forced to see pretty much, she believed me. She was like, something doesn't seem right about this. No, I believe you. And it helps so much to have people believe that what you're saying is true. So I just thank God for her because she believed me. Like the other one obviously didn't. And that was horrible advice. Like, why would I admit to something that is not true and that didn't happen? Why would I lie and say, oh, this happened when it did not?
I'd argue that's really unprofessional with the therapist as well, because are they not supposed to be impartial? And okay, let's look at the therapy for the second. Isn't the therapy supposed to be for your personal well-being, to check that your mental state is okay and that you're okay? Do you know what I mean? That's not going to help your well-being. Yeah,
it's kind of a conflict of interest, and it probably violates, laws like HIPAA, but they're able to access all of that. So, they're all in. It would be better to get, if I was allowed to have my own therapist and it be more confidential, but they have access to all of that.
Yeah, it's fine if they have access to your therapist. I just mean that the way in which your therapist was speaking to you is unprofessional. It's as though they were, they straight up pretty much just accused you of something in the middle of a therapy session. And it's you can't do that.
Yeah.
Can you?
Yeah, that's why I was shocked. I don't think you're allowed to do that. I was shocked. I was like, what? Excuse me? I didn't really, I definitely wanted to get up and walk out and leave, but then I didn't want to get in trouble because you are forced to see a therapist. Once there is a case on any parent or family member or caregiver, you have to have medical. You have to have a psychological evaluation. You have to see a therapist. You have to go to classes. You have to jump through all these hoops to get your children back. And it's hard because you're so heartbroken of not having your children and this whole horrible situation and then you have to go to work and see your kids and then jump through all their hoops. It's so hard. It's so difficult.
What's the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received. Let me see. I think it was a family member, and she said, keep the faith, for he is faithful. Even though you're going through a horrible situation right now, God can turn it around into good to help many other people someday.
What's the biggest life lesson you've learned so far?
That life can be very, very tough at times. We think just by doing everything the right way, everything that we're supposed to, being great citizens, helping others, life can be very hard someday, and sometimes bad things happen to good people, but you could turn your pain into purpose to help many others someday.
You must have been angry for a while at one point. How did you push through that and decide, you know what, I'm going to make something positive out of it?
I was so angry and hurt that this situation happened. What hurt me the most was seeing my kids hurt and how it affected them. And, as a parent, or even if you have like nieces and nephews or friends that have children, you have this feeling that you want to protect them. And that was what was so hard for me, is as their mother, I felt the responsibility to protect them, and I couldn't. That was so heartbreaking. I couldn't protect them from all this hurt and pain that they're experiencing from the system. And just seeing how much it really affected my kids at that time was so heartbreaking. And I felt like my hands were tied behind my back and I couldn't do anything to help them.
But moving forward, you obviously chose to turn it into a positive thing. You chose to start speaking about it. How did you get to that point, or that realization point?
I took like a year. So from 2018 to 2019, I took a year to try to heal from it. And I wrote my book as a healing process to write about it and speak about it. But at first I felt so hurt and in pain that I didn't want to speak about it. Honestly, I didn't want to speak about it. I didn't want to fight for change, because when I was praying, I'm like, how am I supposed to heal from something so horrible and traumatic and fight for change at the same time? Because honestly, I went into a senator's office, and it was a federal building. You had to go through security, and their office, there's like all these state seals everywhere and the flags. And here I am, I'm like, oh man, I want to fight for change, but I'm still healing from this. So it's so hard. I'm like, here I'm crying, talking about this at this, official office and with a senator's assistant. And I'm crying about this. And I don't like crying in front of people, because the way I was raised with 3 older brothers and crying was, shown as weakness. And at that time, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to be crying in front of lawmakers, but I couldn't help it. That was the toughest part for me, is to try to heal from it and fight for change at the same time. But thankfully, over the years, I've been able to continue to heal from it. And it doesn't affect me as much as it did before. It still does, but I'm able to bring myself back emotionally, remind myself these are just, painful, traumatic memories of the past. This is a present. Things are so much better now. But that was the toughest thing for me, is to fight for change and heal from it at the same time.
Do you have any upcoming projects or final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
We are speaking about making our second documentary, and it would be amazing to have a docuseries, because there's, if it's a continuation of our story, if that's what the audience wants to see, or if we know so many other families with compelling stories, but we would definitely love to keep going and keep making documentaries, because what I love about documentaries is we make it kind of like a movie. It's kind of like a movie documentary. There's music and images to make it more captivating and interesting. And it's taking someone's story and bringing it to life to help raise awareness and help create change.
I really wish you the best of luck with it. I'm excited to see the documentary when it's released.
Thank you. I'll definitely know.
Yeah, let me know. I'll share it with everybody.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you. Thank you so much for appearing on the show. for sharing your story. Amazing stuff. You're an amazing person. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. You are too. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate you.
It's been an absolute pleasure. To all the listeners of the Christian Reeve Podcast, thank you so much for watching and listening. And I hope you got as much out of this as I did. As always, be safe, be well, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Things don't work like they used to. Can't place your bets on the 9 to 5. Things don't work like they used to. No, there's not enough to keep you alive. Head in the clouds.